Injured bird lands in girl's arms. What follows will leave you speechless. How will this story unfold? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The morning sun bathed the small town in a warm golden glow as Mia, an 8-year-old girl with an insatiable love for nature, ran through the meadows near her home. She loved exploring, collecting wildflowers, and watching birds flit through the sky. Her mother always told her she had a special connection with animals, a gift that made them trust her in a way few others could. That morning, as she wandered near the lake, something unexpected happened. A sudden commotion in the sky caught her attention. A flurry of wings, a loud screech, and a blur of feathers tumbling toward the ground. Without thinking, Mia extended her arms, and to her astonishment, a small, injured bird landed right in her hands. The tiny creature trembled in her grasp, its delicate body heaving with each labored breath. Blood stained its feathers, and one of its wings was bent at an unnatural angle. Mia gasped, her heart pounding as she carefully examined the bird. She had never seen one up close like this before. Its eyes were wide with fear, its beak slightly open as if gasping for air. "Shh. It's okay," she whispered, stroking its head with a finger as gently as she could. The bird didn't struggle, didn't try to escape. It simply looked up at her with trust, as if it knew she was its only hope. Mia's mind raced. She had to do something, she couldn't just leave the poor thing there. Cradling the bird carefully, she ran back toward her house, her bare feet kicking up dust on the dirt path. Bursting through the front door, she called out, "Mom, Dad, I need help." Her parents rushed to her side, their faces filled with concern as they saw the injured bird trembling in her hands. "Oh, Mia," her mother murmured, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "We need to be very careful. It's badly hurt." Her father, who had some experience with animals, examined the bird closely. "It looks like it might have been attacked, maybe by a hawk or a larger bird," he said. "We need to clean its wounds and keep it warm." Mia refused to let go of the bird as they moved to the kitchen. Her mother quickly prepared a soft towel-lined box while her father fetched antiseptic and tweezers. "We'll do our best," he reassured her, "but this little guy is in a rough shape." Mia sat beside the box, watching with teary eyes as her father gently dabbed at the wound. The bird let out a weak chirp but didn't resist. "He's being so brave," Mia whispered, stroking its head. "I think he knows we're trying to help." Her mother smiled softly. "Maybe he does." Over the next few days, Mia devoted herself entirely to caring for the bird. She named him Sky, inspired by the vast blue sky he once soared through so effortlessly. Every morning she would check on him, ensuring he was comfortable and had fresh water. She even learned how to feed him with a tiny dropper, carefully placing food near his beak. Sky seemed to trust her completely, never flinching when she reached for him, never attempting to fly away. As days turned into a week, something incredible happened. Sky began to recover. His once frail body grew stronger, his tiny chirps became louder, and most remarkably, his injured wings started to heal. Mia could hardly contain her excitement when Sky attempted to flutter his wings for the first time since the accident. "Look, Mom. He's trying," she squealed, watching as the bird stretched his wings, testing their strength. Her parents exchanged a knowing glance. "It's almost time, sweetheart," her father said gently. "He's getting ready to go back to where he belongs." The thought filled Mia with both joy and sadness. She knew Sky wasn't meant to stay with her forever, but the bond they had formed was unlike anything she had ever experienced. One crisp morning, with the autumn leaves swirling in the breeze, Mia carried Sky to the same meadow where she had first caught him. The sun was rising, casting golden hues over the landscape. "You're ready," she whispered, placing him gently on the ground. Sky hesitated for a moment, looking up at her as if he, too, felt the weight of goodbye. Then, with a powerful thrust of his wings, he lifted off the ground, soaring into the sky with newfound strength. Mia watched in awe, her heart swelling with pride. But just as she turned to leave, something astonishing happened. Sky circled back, swooping down low over her head before ascending once more. He wasn't just leaving. He was saying thank you. Tears welled in Mia's eyes as she waved up at the tiny figure disappearing into the sky. She knew she might never see Sky again, but she would always carry their story in her heart. As she walked home, she realized something powerful. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change a life. And in this case, it had changed too. 4 days after Sky's departure, Mia found herself glancing at the sky, wondering if he would ever come back. Her heart ached a little, missing the quiet companionship of the little bird she had nursed back to health. But she also felt an overwhelming sense of peace, knowing that she had given Sky a second chance at life. One afternoon, as Mia sat on the front porch sketching in her notebook, she heard the distant chirping of birds. She had become more attuned to their sounds since caring for Sky. But this time the sound was different, familiar. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked up and saw a small bird perched on the fence, tilting its head toward her. The markings on its feathers were unmistakable. It was Sky. Excitement bubbled up in her chest. "Sky?" she whispered, barely believing her eyes. The little bird chirped in response, then fluttered onto the railing, hopping closer to her. Tears welled up in Mia's eyes as she slowly reached out her hand. To her amazement, Sky didn't fly away. He simply watched her, his tiny chest puffing up as if he was proud of himself. Mia's mother stepped out onto the porch, stopping in her tracks when she saw the bird. "Is that?" she asked, her voice trailing off in awe. Mia nodded. "It's Sky. He came back." Her father joined them, smiling warmly. "Sometimes when we help something heal, it never really leaves us," he said. "Maybe he just wanted to check in." Sky stayed on the fence for several minutes, chirping and hopping around as if he had a story to tell. Then, with a final flutter of his wings, he soared back into the sky, disappearing into the golden horizon. Mia exhaled a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had in days. Sky had come back, even if just for a moment, to remind her that their bond was real. From that day forward, Mia continued watching the birds in her neighborhood, feeling a connection to them that she never had before. Whenever she saw a small bird soaring high, she smiled, wondering if it was Sky, keeping an eye on the girl who had saved him. And in that moment she knew, kindness had a way of finding its way back. Even in the smallest, most unexpected ways. Mia sat on the front porch that evening, still processing what had happened. She held her notebook close to her chest, remembering the way Sky had looked at her before flying away. It wasn't just an ordinary bird landing in her hands that day, it was a sign. A sign that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness could create the biggest ripples in the world. Her mother brought out a warm cup of tea and sat beside her. "You've been quiet," she said gently. "Thinking about Sky?" Mia nodded. "I just can't believe he came back. Even for a moment. It felt like he was saying thank you." Her mother smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Maybe he was. Animals have their own way of showing gratitude. You gave him a chance to fly again." Mia looked up at the sky, now painted in soft purples and blues as the sun set behind the trees. She felt something shift in her heart, a realization that she wanted to do more. Saving Sky had ignited something in her, a sense of responsibility for the creatures around her. "I think I want to help more animals," Mia said, looking at her mother with determination. "Maybe volunteer at the wildlife center or rescue birds that need help. I don't know, it just feels right." Her mother's eyes softened with pride. "That's a beautiful idea. You have such a kind heart, Mia." The next morning, Mia started researching ways she could get involved. She read about bird rehabilitation programs, sanctuaries, and how to create a safe environment for wildlife in their backyard. She even built a small birdhouse with her father, placing it near the tree where she had first found Sky. Days turned into weeks, and Mia's connection to nature deepened. She noticed birds she had never paid attention to before, their songs becoming familiar melodies in her daily life. She found peace in watching them, in knowing that she had made a difference, even if it was just for one tiny creature. One crisp autumn morning, as she walked through the park, she heard the familiar chirp again. She stopped in her tracks, heart racing, as a small bird with familiar markings landed on a branch near her. It was Sky. Mia's breath caught as she watched him, his tiny frame still strong, his wings carrying him effortlessly through the air. He chirped again, tilting his head in that same curious way he always had. It was as if he was reminding her she was on the right path. And for the first time in a long while, Mia felt certain that she had found her calling backslash. Mia couldn't shake the feeling of amazement as she watched Sky disappear into the sky once more. It was as if the universe had whispered a secret to her, something that only she could understand. The connection she had formed with the small, fragile bird had changed something inside her. It was no longer just about saving one life, it was about the impact that small actions could have on the world. Determined to keep that feeling alive, she threw herself into learning more about wildlife rehabilitation. She spent hours at the library, checking out books on bird species, migration patterns, and first aid techniques for injured wildlife. At school, she talked to her science teacher about starting a conservation project, hoping to get her classmates involved. It wasn't just about Sky anymore, it was about every creature out there that needed a second chance. One weekend, her mother drove her to a wildlife rescue center outside of town. The moment they arrived, Mia felt a sense of belonging. The center was surrounded by trees, the sound of chirping birds filling the air. Volunteers moved between enclosures, feeding animals, checking on their health, and releasing those who had recovered. She met an older woman named Evelyn, who had been rehabilitating birds for over 20 years. "You remind me of myself at your age," Evelyn said, handing Mia a small dish filled with seeds. "I started with one injured sparrow just like you. Now, I can't imagine my life without this work." Mia listened intently as Evelyn taught her how to care for injured birds, how to handle them gently, how to recognize signs of distress. She learned about the dangers birds faced: deforestation, pollution, windows that they couldn't see. She hadn't realized just how fragile their world was, how much they depended on people like Evelyn to survive. At the end of the day, Mia felt something stir deep within her. She didn't just want to help now and then, she wanted to dedicate her life to this. She wanted to be someone birds could trust, someone who made a real difference. When they got home, she sat at her desk, writing in her notebook. "Sky came back today. Just for a moment. But that moment changed everything. Maybe he was telling me to keep going, to help others like him. I don't know where this path will lead, but I do know one thing: I want to follow it." And so, with newfound purpose, Mia took the first steps toward becoming a protector of the wild, her heart forever linked to the creatures that had once seemed so distant, but now felt like family. As the weeks passed, Mia's dedication to wildlife rehabilitation only grew stronger. She spent her afternoons volunteering at the Wildlife Rescue Center, learning everything she could from Evelyn and the other caretakers. Each day brought new challenges, but she welcomed them all, whether it was feeding orphaned baby birds, tending to an injured hawk, or helping to clean enclosures. The work was messy, sometimes exhausting, but it gave her a sense of purpose she had never felt before. One evening, just as the sun was beginning to set, Mia received a call from Evelyn. "Mia, we have a situation. A farmer found a nest of abandoned barn owl chicks, and we need someone to monitor them overnight. Would you be able to help?" Without hesitation, Mia said yes. Her mother drove her to the center, and she rushed inside to find Evelyn holding a small box with 3 fluffy white chicks, their eyes barely open. "They're hungry, but they need to be fed carefully. Their mother would normally do this, but since she's not here, we have to step in," Evelyn explained. Mia nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle in. She spent hours that night carefully feeding the chicks with small tweezers, making sure they got the right amount of food. She whispered softly to them, letting them hear the sound of her voice. At one point, she paused, watching the tiny creatures huddled together for warmth. She thought about Sky, the bird who had changed her life, and realized that every single life, no matter how small, was worth fighting for. Morning arrived, and Evelyn returned to check on them. She smiled when she saw Mia still awake, her eyes heavy with exhaustion but filled with determination. "You did well," Evelyn said, placing a hand on Mia's shoulder. "I think you've found your calling." Mia felt a lump form in her throat. She had always wondered what she was meant to do with her life, what her place in the world was. But now she knew. From that moment on, she was no longer just a girl who had saved one bird. She was a protector of the wild, a guardian of the voiceless. And she knew that no matter where life took her, she would always carry that purpose in her heart. Mia's life had taken a completely new turn. After saving Sky, the injured bird that had landed in her arms, she had immersed herself in wildlife rehabilitation. But now, something even bigger was on the horizon. The Wildlife Center had offered her a chance to help release a group of fully rehabilitated birds back into the wild. A moment she had been dreaming about since she first stepped into the rescue center. She arrived early that morning, the sky still painted in shades of soft pink and gold. The crisp morning air carried the songs of birds waking up to a new day. Mia felt a mix of excitement and nerves fluttering in her stomach as she stepped out of the car. Evelyn greeted her with a warm smile. "Are you ready?" Evelyn asked, handing her a clipboard with details about each bird that was being released today. Mia nodded. "I've been waiting for this moment." Evelyn chuckled. "I knew you'd say that. Let's get started." Inside the center, there were 4 birds ready to be released. 3 were barn owls that had been rescued as orphan chicks, the very ones Mia had helped care for a few weeks ago. The 4th was a red-tailed hawk that had been found with a wing injury. Seeing them now, strong and alert, filled Mia with an overwhelming sense of pride. "We'll take them out to the clearing," Evelyn explained. "It's the perfect place for their first taste of freedom." Mia and the other volunteers carefully transported the birds in large, ventilated carriers. As they made their way through the forested path, Mia glanced down at the hawk's carrier, remembering the first time she had held Sky. It had been a moment of fear and uncertainty, but also of connection, one that had changed her life forever. Finally they reached the clearing. The sun was higher in the sky now, casting golden light over the open field. Evelyn went first, gently opening the carrier for one of the barn owls. The owl hesitated for a moment, its round, dark eyes scanning the sky before it spread its wings and took flight. The second and third owls followed, their movements graceful, their calls echoing in the open air. Mia held her breath as Evelyn signaled for her to release the hawk. She knelt beside the carrier, her hands trembling slightly as she unlatched the door. The hawk, a majestic creature with sharp eyes, took a moment before stepping forward. "Come on," Mia whispered softly. "You're ready?" As if understanding her words, the hawk spread its wings wide and launched itself into the air. Mia watched in awe as it soared higher and higher, until it was just a speck against the blue sky. She felt tears sting her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. Evelyn placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's what it's all about," she said. Mia nodded, unable to find the right words to express what she was feeling. It was more than joy, more than pride, it was a deep sense of belonging. The rest of the day was spent at the center, checking on new arrivals and ensuring all the other animals were being taken care of. Mia stayed longer than usual, not wanting to leave the place that had become so important to her. When it was finally time to go, she stood at the entrance for a moment, looking back at the building, at the trees, at the sky where the birds she had helped were now flying free. She realized then that this was just the beginning. There were still so many animals in need, so many lives to save. And she would be there, ready to help, ready to make a difference. As she walked back to the car, a single feather floated down from the sky, landing gently at her feet. Mia picked it up, smiling as she held it in her hand. A reminder. A promise. She would never stop fighting for them. Days passed, and Mia found herself more involved than ever at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. Every morning, she woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, eager to learn more about the birds and the animals that were brought in for care. But there was one thing she couldn't stop thinking about: Sky. Since the day she had found the injured bird in her arms, she had felt a deep connection with it. And though she knew releasing animals back into the wild was always the goal, a part of her still longed to see Sky again. One evening, as the sun began to set, Mia and Evelyn walked through the nature reserve near the center. It was a routine they had started, a way to observe the wildlife and discuss the cases they were working on. "You've come a long way, Mia," Evelyn said, breaking the peaceful silence. "I can see how much this means to you." Mia nodded. I want to do more. I want to make a real difference." "You already have," Evelyn assured her. "You helped save Sky, remember? And you've helped so many other birds and animals since then." Mia sighed, looking up at the sky, watching as birds flew overhead. "I just wonder if Sky is okay. I know it sounds silly, but I wish I could see her again." Evelyn smiled knowingly. "It's not silly at all. We all get attached sometimes. But you gave her the best chance she could have." They continued walking, the soft rustling of the trees filling the quiet evening air. Just as they were about to turn back, Mia suddenly stopped in her tracks. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Evelyn nodded, her eyes scanning the trees. It was a familiar call, one Mia had heard many times before. A few moments later, a bird swooped down from the trees, landing on a nearby branch. Mia's heart pounded in her chest. It was a hawk. It took a few seconds before she recognized the distinct markings, the way it tilted its head slightly as it looked at her. "Sky," she breathed. The bird ruffled its feathers, watching her with sharp, intelligent eyes. Evelyn chuckled. "Well, would you look at that?" Mia couldn't believe it. After all this time, Sky had returned, or maybe she had never really left. She took a cautious step forward, but Sky remained still, as if she knew exactly who Mia was. "You remember me, don't you?" Mia whispered. Sky let out a soft call before spreading her wings, soaring into the sky once more. Mia watched until she disappeared into the horizon, a lump forming in her throat. Evelyn placed a hand on her shoulder. "Looks like she came to say thank you." Mia wiped at her eyes, smiling. "Yeah, I think she did." As they turned to head back, Mia felt lighter than she had in weeks. She knew now without a doubt that this was where she was meant to be. She wasn't just saving animals. She was building connections, changing lives, both theirs and hers. And she would keep doing it for as long as she could. Mia spent the next few days replaying the moment she had seen Sky again. The encounter had been brief, but it had meant everything to her. It was a sign, proof that the work she was doing truly made a difference. Determined more than ever, Mia threw herself into her responsibilities at the rehabilitation center. She learned how to treat different injuries, how to help birds regain their strength, and how to prepare them for release back into the wild. Each time an animal was successfully rehabilitated and set free, she felt a sense of pride, knowing she had played a part in its journey. One afternoon, while cleaning out the cages in the aviary, Mia overheard Evelyn speaking with someone near the entrance. She looked up to see a man in his late 30s, dressed in ranger gear, holding a small cardboard box. His face was filled with concern. "We found her near the lake," the man said. "She was struggling to fly. Thought she might have injured her wing." Mia quickly put down her tools and approached them. "What kind of bird is it?" she asked. The ranger opened the box slightly, revealing a familiar brown-feathered hawk. Mia's breath caught in her throat. It was Sky. Evelyn's expression shifted into one of quiet recognition. "Let's get her inside," she said calmly, leading them toward the examination room. Mia followed, her heart pounding as she watched Sky lying still in the box. The last time they had seen each other, she had been soaring through the sky, strong and free. Now she looked exhausted, her feathers slightly ruffled. As Evelyn gently lifted her out of the box, Mia saw that her right wing was hanging at an awkward angle. "It looks like a possible sprain or strain," Evelyn murmured. "We'll have to take a closer look." Mia stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she stroked Sky's head. "She came back," she whispered. Evelyn glanced at her. She must have known she'd be safe here. Over the next few days, Mia dedicated all her energy to helping Sky recover. She assisted with her treatments, carefully wrapping her wing and making sure she ate enough to regain her strength. Unlike the first time, Sky didn't seem frightened of her. She remained calm whenever Mia was near, allowing her to feed and care for her without resistance. It was as if she remembered that Mia had once saved her. One evening, after finishing her shift, Mia lingered by Sky's enclosure, watching as the hawk rested. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "I'll make sure of it." For the first time in days, Sky lifted her head and let out a soft chirp. Mia smiled. No matter how long it took, she would stay by her side. Because that's what you did for family, you never gave up on them. Mia woke up earlier than usual the next morning, a sense of urgency pulling her out of bed before the sun had fully risen. She dressed quickly, grabbed a cup of tea, and made her way to the rehabilitation center before her shift officially started. As she entered the aviary, the soft sounds of birds stirring filled the air. Some were stretching their wings, others chirping softly in the morning light. But Mia's focus was solely on Sky. She approached the hawk's enclosure, her heart clenching as she saw the beautiful bird still resting, her injured wing tucked carefully against her body. Sky's eyes flickered open as Mia neared, and for a moment their gazes locked. "Good morning," Mia whispered, crouching beside her. "How are you feeling today?" Sky blinked slowly, then let out a soft chirp as if answering her. Evelyn had told her that birds of prey took time to heal. A wing injury was especially difficult. It required patience and, most importantly, trust. Sky's body needed to heal, but she also had to rebuild her confidence to fly again. Mia glanced at the feeding schedule and saw that Sky hadn't eaten much the night before. That worried her. A bird that refused to eat was often a sign of distress. She disappeared into the storage room and returned with a small piece of raw meat, carefully placing it inside Sky's enclosure. "Come on, girl. You need to eat." Sky turned her head away. Mia sighed. She had seen this before. Wild birds often rejected food when they were in pain or feeling vulnerable. But she wasn't going to give up. She sat down cross-legged outside the enclosure, just far enough to give Sky space, but close enough to let her know she wasn't alone. "You know," Mia said softly, "when I found you that day by the lake, I was scared. I thought you weren't going to make it. But you did. And I promised you then that I'd always look out for you." She pulled her knees to her chest, watching Sky's slow breathing. "I know you don't want to be here. You're meant to be out there, soaring through the sky. But you need time. Just a little more time." Minutes passed in silence. Then, to Mia's surprise, Sky turned her head and slowly inched toward the food. Mia held her breath. The hawk hesitated, then picked up the meat in her beak and swallowed it. Mia felt tears prick at her eyes. "That's my girl," she whispered. Over the next several weeks, Sky's strength slowly returned. Her wing, once weak and immobile, began to regain movement. Mia worked with Evelyn and the other staff members to start short training exercises, small, controlled flights within the enclosed rehabilitation area. At first, Sky was hesitant, flapping her wings only slightly before retreating. But with each passing day, she grew bolder. Mia watched with pride as the bird she had once saved was now saving herself. One evening, Mia and Evelyn stood side by side, observing Sky as she perched on a wooden post. "She's almost ready," Evelyn murmured. Mia swallowed the lump in her throat. She had known this day was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. "She's come so far," Mia said, her voice tinged with both pride and sadness. Evelyn nodded. "And you were a big part of that. She trusts you, Mia. That's rare." Mia exhaled slowly. "When will she be released?" "In a few days. We want to do one final check, but she's strong enough now." Mia nodded, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. That night, she sat by Sky's enclosure, just like she had on the first night the hawk had come back to the center. "You're going home soon," Mia whispered. "Back to where you belong." Sky tilted her head slightly, watching Mia with sharp golden eyes. Mia smiled. "I'm going to miss you." The hawk let out a quiet chirp, and for a moment, Mia allowed herself to believe that Sky understood. The day of Sky's release arrived with a crisp breeze and a sky so blue it almost looked unreal. Mia stood at the edge of a vast open field, her heart pounding. A small group of staff members had gathered to witness the moment. The cage door was opened, and for a moment, Sky hesitated. Mia held her breath. Then, with a powerful flap of her wings, Sky launched herself into the air. Mia felt tears roll down her cheeks as she watched the hawk ascend higher and higher, until she was just a dark silhouette against the sky. For a moment, Sky circled overhead as if saying goodbye. Then she was gone, disappearing into the horizon. Mia wiped her eyes, feeling a mix of emotions she could hardly put into words. Evelyn placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You did good, Mia." Mia exhaled deeply, nodding. "She's free. That's all that matters." And as she stood there, watching the sky stretch endlessly before her, Mia knew that Sky would always be a part of her, no matter how far she flew. Mia returned to her routine at the rehabilitation center, but something felt different. Every morning she would instinctively check Sky's old enclosure, half expecting to see the hawk perched there, watching her with those sharp golden eyes. The absence was bittersweet. Evelyn noticed her quiet demeanor and nudged her one afternoon while they prepared food for the other birds. "You miss her, don't you?" Mia sighed, placing a container of fresh meat on the counter. "Yeah. I know it's selfish, but I got so used to her being here. Now it feels empty." Evelyn gave a small smile. "That's the nature of this work. We help them heal, but they're not meant to stay." "You did exactly what you were supposed to do." Mia nodded, knowing she was right. Still, the connection she had formed with Sky felt deeper than anything she had experienced before. One evening as she walked home, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink, she found herself stopping by the lake, the very spot where she had found Sky injured all those months ago. The water was calm, reflecting the trees in a perfect mirror image. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the sounds of nature around her. Then something made her freeze. A familiar cry echoed through the air. Mia's eyes snapped open, her heart hammering in her chest. She turned, scanning the treetops. And then she saw her. Sky. Perched high on a branch, the hawk looked down at her, head slightly tilted as if recognizing her. Mia's breath caught. "Sky?" The bird let out another sharp cry, then spread her wings and took flight, circling once before soaring into the open sky. Mia stood there, unable to move, her chest swelling with something indescribable. It was as if Sky had come back, just for a moment, to say thank you. She watched until the hawk disappeared beyond the trees, leaving nothing but the wind and the rustling leaves in her wake. Mia smiled to herself, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "You're free," she whispered. And in that moment she realized so was she. The encounter with Sky left Mia feeling a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. Seeing the hawk soaring freely, strong and confident, was proof that all the time, energy and love she had poured into her care had truly mattered. It was no longer about longing for Sky to return, it was about knowing that she had helped her find her way back to where she belonged. But instead of feeling like something had ended, Mia felt a new sense of purpose begin to bloom inside her. Saving Sky had set something in motion within her, something she could no longer ignore. She didn't just want to help animals now and then, she wanted to dedicate her life to it. She threw herself even deeper into her work at the rehabilitation center. She spent hours learning about different species, taking notes on their behaviors, diets, and needs. Evelyn, seeing her dedication, began assigning her more responsibilities, feeding schedules, medical checkups, and even guiding new volunteers. Mia found herself thriving in the role, realizing that the more she learned, the more she could do. One day, as she helped prepare an enclosure for a group of rescued songbirds, Evelyn approached her with a thoughtful expression. "Mia, how would you feel about speaking to a group of students next week?" Mia paused, glancing up. Students? Evelyn nodded. A local school is visiting for an educational tour. We always try to teach kids about wildlife conservation, and I think you'd be perfect for it. Mia felt a nervous flutter in her stomach. She loved animals, but talking to a crowd? That was different. Are you sure I'm the right person for this? Evelyn chuckled. You have more passion for this than anyone else here. I think you'll do great. Mia hesitated, but then she thought about Sky. About how much she had learned since that first day she had held the injured hawk in her arms. If she could inspire even one person to care about wildlife the way she did, wouldn't it be worth it? She took a deep breath and nodded. I'll do it. When the day of the school visit arrived, Mia stood at the front of the rehabilitation center's outdoor space, a dozen young students sitting in front of her, their eyes wide with curiosity. She took a deep breath, gripping her note cards, but as she started talking, the nerves faded. She told them about Sky, about how a single act of kindness had changed both of their lives. She explained why wildlife needed people to care, why small actions, like keeping bird feeders clean, not disturbing nests, or even just being aware of the creatures around them, mattered. To her surprise, the kids listened intently. They asked questions, some shared their own stories of finding injured animals. And by the end, Mia realized something important. This wasn't just about saving animals. It was about educating people, helping them understand why these creatures deserve protection. Evelyn patted her shoulder as the students left. See? Told you you'd be great. Mia grinned, feeling something settle inside her. She wasn't just a caretaker anymore. She was a voice for those who couldn't speak. And for the first time, she truly believed she was exactly where she was meant to be. The school visit marked a turning point for Mia. She had spent months learning how to care for animals, how to rehabilitate and release them, but now she understood something even more important. Teaching others was just as powerful as rescuing. If more people cared, if more people understood the role they played in protecting wildlife, then fewer animals would end up hurt or abandoned in the first place. Fueled by this realization, Mia dove even deeper into her work at the rehabilitation center. She helped Evelyn develop new educational programs for visitors, worked on setting up interactive displays about local bird species, and even started documenting the different rescues they had done in a small journal. She had once thought that saving Sky was an isolated moment, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. But now she knew it was just the beginning. One afternoon, as Mia was cleaning out an enclosure, Evelyn approached her with a curious expression. Do you have a minute? Mia wiped her hands on a rag and nodded. Of course. Evelyn led her to the staff lounge, where a familiar face was waiting. Ranger Thomas, the man who had brought Sky back to the center weeks ago. Mia felt a jolt of surprise. Ranger Thomas? The ranger gave her a friendly nod. Mia, good to see you again. I hear you've been doing some incredible work here. Mia blinked, glancing at Evelyn. Thank you. But why are you here? Evelyn smiled. He has a proposition for you. Ranger Thomas leaned forward slightly. We've been following the work you've been doing and we're really impressed. The way you helped Sky, the way you've been working with the center, it's rare to see someone your age with this level of dedication. And we could use someone like you. Mia frowned slightly, not understanding. Use me for what? Thomas chuckled. There's an opportunity to assist with a special wildlife protection program we're launching. It's a mentorship initiative, one where young conservationists like yourself get the chance to work with rangers in the field. You'd be learning hands-on how to track, monitor, and protect endangered species. It's an internship, but it could lead to something even bigger in the future. Mia's heart skipped a beat. Go into the field? Work with real wildlife experts? Protect animals directly in their natural habitat? Her mind raced. You want me to be part of this? Thomas smiled. Only if you're interested. But from what I hear, I think you'd be a perfect fit. Mia turned to Evelyn, who was watching her with an encouraging expression. This is an incredible opportunity, Evelyn said softly. But it's your choice, Mia. You've already made such an impact here. If you stay, we'll be lucky to have you. But if you go, you'll be making a difference on a whole new level. Mia felt her pulse pounding. She thought about everything that had led her here, the day Sky had fallen into her arms, the months of nursing her back to health, the moment she had finally let her go. She had always felt like she was following something, a calling, a purpose. And now it was leading her somewhere new. She looked up at Ranger Thomas, her heart pounding, and smiled. I'm in. A few weeks later, Mia stood at the edge of a vast wildlife reserve, a ranger-issued field notebook in hand, a radio clipped to her belt. She took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp scent of pine trees and damp earth. This was it. Her first day as a wildlife field assistant. As the sun rose over the horizon, she felt something shift deep inside her. She had started this journey by saving one bird. Now she was stepping into a world where she could help countless others. Mia smiled as she took her first step forward. This was just the beginning.